Captain Li Wujin had been flying cargo ships for 15 years. He knew every sound his old transport made during flight, the deep hum of the engines when everything ran smooth, the small clicks and beeps from the control panel, even the way the metal walls would creak during hyperspace jumps. But the sound he heard now was completely new. It was like a scream mixed with thunder. His ship was shaking so hard that his teeth rattled. Red warning lights flashed across every surface. The main computer was shouting alerts in 3 different languages. "What is happening?" Wujin said to himself as he grabbed the control stick. His cargo ship was being pulled out of hyperspace by something huge and powerful. Through the front window, he could see a massive whirlpool of bright energy spinning in the darkness of space. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. The energy whirlpool was pulling his ship toward something that looked impossible. A giant city was floating in space without any planet to hold it up. The city was made of crystal that glowed with soft blue and purple light. The crystals were arranged in tall towers and curved bridges that seemed to grow like living things. Wujin had traveled to dozens of worlds, but he had never seen anything like this. His ship had no power to resist the pull. The engines were completely dead. All he could do was hold on as his transport was dragged toward what looked like a docking area on the Crystal City. The docking bay was enormous, easily big enough to hold 50 ships like his. The crash was not as bad as Wujin expected. His ship hit the crystal floor hard, but the crystals seemed to bend and absorb some of the impact. Still, the landing threw him against the wall and left him dizzy. He could taste blood in his mouth and feel bruises forming on his arms. Smoke was coming from the engine room. Sparks flew from broken control panels. His ship would never fly again. But Wujin was alive, and that was more than he had expected a few minutes ago. He opened the emergency hatch and stepped out onto the crystal floor. The air was warm and breathable, which surprised him. Most alien cities needed special breathing equipment for humans. The crystal walls around him pulsed with gentle light, almost like a heartbeat. That was when Wujin saw them. The dragons. They were nothing like the dragons from old Earth stories. These dragons walked upright on 2 powerful legs. Their scales were not just one color, but shifted and changed like liquid metal. Some had scales that moved from deep blue to silver. Others went from gold to green to purple. They were huge, at least 3 meters tall, with long necks and heads that looked both intelligent and dangerous. Their wings were folded against their backs. The wings were not just for flying. They were covered with patterns that glowed and changed color. Wujin realized the wing patterns were some kind of communication. The dragons were talking to each other using lights on their wings. 5 dragons approached his crashed ship. The one in front had scales that were mostly deep purple with lines of gold running through them. This dragon was clearly the leader. Its head was held high and the other dragons stayed slightly behind it. But the strangest thing was not how the dragons looked. It was how they spoke. The leader dragon opened its mouth, but no sound came out. Instead, words formed directly inside Wujin's mind. The voice was cold and sharp like metal scraping against stone. Another meat creature from the weak worlds, the dragon's voice said inside his head. How did something so soft and fragile survive crossing the void of space? Wujin felt dizzy again, but not from his injuries. Having someone else's voice inside his mind was deeply disturbing. He could feel the dragon's thoughts pressing against his own thoughts. There was incredible intelligence there, but also something that felt like complete contempt. "I can hear you thinking, human," the dragon continued. "Your mind is so simple and loud, like a child banging on metal pots." The other dragons moved closer. Now Wujin could hear all of their voices in his head at once. It was like being in a room full of people who were all talking about him but pretending he was not there. "Look how small it is. Do you think this one can even lift its own body weight? The humans we keep in the outer colonies are stronger than this one. How do these creatures survive without proper claws or teeth? Its skin looks like it would tear if you breathed on it too hard." Wujin tried to speak, but his voice came out as a croak. He cleared his throat and tried again. "I am Captain Li Wujin of the Earth Transport Guild," he said. His voice sounded very small in the huge crystal chamber. The purple and gold dragon made a sound that might have been laughter. "It makes noise with its mouth hole," the dragon said to the others. "How primitive. And it thinks we care about its tiny titles and weak organizations. My name is Sovereign Drax," the dragon continued, its mental voice now directed at Wujin. "I rule this section of Cathari-Vel, the greatest city in this part of the galaxy. You have crashed into our world, human. That makes you our property now. Wu Jin felt anger rising in his chest, but he forced it down. Getting angry would not help him survive this situation. He needed to understand where he was and what these dragons wanted. "I did not mean to come here," Wu Jin said. "My ship was pulled off course by some kind of energy field. If you can help me repair my ship, I will leave and not bother you again." This time, several of the dragons made the laughing sound. Their wing patterns flashed with colors that Wu Jin somehow understood meant amusement and mockery. "Leave?" Drax said. "Human, you are in the heart of the draconic hegemony now. We rule over 40 star systems and hundreds of different species. Your kind serves us in the outer colonies. Doing simple work that requires no real intelligence, you will join them. But first," Drax continued, and his mental voice became darker, "you will help us understand how your pathetic species has survived as long as it has. We are facing an enemy that even dragons struggle to defeat. Perhaps studying human weakness will show us their weakness too." Wu Jin felt ice forming in his stomach. These dragons did not see him as a person. They saw him as a thing to be used and studied. But there was something else in Drax's mental voice. Under all the arrogance and contempt, Wu Jin could hear something that surprised him. Fear. These powerful dragons, who ruled over 40 star systems, were afraid of something. And that fear was so strong that they were willing to consider learning from humans, even though they clearly believed humans were worthless. As the dragons surrounded him and began to escort him deeper into their crystal city, Wu Jin made a decision that would change everything. Instead of trying to escape or fight back, he would listen and learn. He would find out what could make dragons afraid. And maybe, just maybe, he would find a way to prove that humans were not as weak as these dragons believed. The dragons led Wu Jin deeper into their crystal city. Walking through Cathari Vel was like walking through a living dream. The walls around them pulsed with soft light that moved in waves from floor to ceiling. The light was not electric like human cities used. It was organic, like the glow from deep-sea creatures he had seen in Earth's oceans. The corridors were huge, built for beings much larger than humans. Wu Jin had to take 2 steps for every 1 step the dragons took. His legs were already getting tired, but he did not want to show weakness to his captors. As they walked, Wu Jin saw other dragons moving through the city. Some were working at control panels that seemed to be grown from the same crystal as the walls. Others were carrying what looked like weapons, though they were unlike any weapons Wu Jin had seen before. The weapons were curved and seemed to be alive, pulsing with the same organic light as everything else. But it was not just dragons in the city. Wu Jin saw other alien species too. Most of them were much smaller than the dragons and moved quickly to get out of the way when dragons approached. These other beings kept their heads down and did not make eye contact with their dragon masters. Sovereign Drax noticed Wu Jin looking at the other aliens. "Those are some of the species that serve us," Drax said into Wu Jin's mind. "The blue ones with 6 arms are Kethans. They are good at building things but cannot think beyond simple instructions. The floating gas clouds are Nephilim. They can do many calculations at once but have no physical strength. The insect creatures are Cricks. They work well in groups but have no imagination." Wu Jin watched a group of Cricks working together to move a large piece of equipment. They moved in perfect coordination like parts of a single machine. But when a dragon approached, they scattered in different directions, clearly afraid. "And humans?" Wu Jin asked. "What do you use humans for?" "Manual labor mostly," Drax replied without any emotion in his mental voice. "Your species is stronger than it looks but not very smart. Humans can work in dangerous conditions that would kill other species. They are also good at following orders without asking too many questions." The word stung, but Wu Jin kept his face blank. He was learning that dragons saw all other species as tools to be used. Each species had its purpose, but none were seen as equals. They reached a large chamber that was clearly some kind of command center. Dozens of dragons worked at control stations while holographic displays showed star maps and battle formations. The displays were 3-dimensional and moved constantly, showing ships and fleets moving through space. But what caught Wu Jin's attention was the mood in the room. Despite their obvious technological superiority, the dragons seemed tense and worried. Their scales were darker than the dragons he had seen in other parts of the city. Their wing patterns flashed with rapid, nervous colors. "This is our war room," Drax explained. "From here, we coordinate the defense of our territory against the greatest threat our people have ever faced." "What kind of threat?" Wu Jin asked. Instead of answering with words, Drax directed Wu Jin's attention to the largest holographic display. It showed a star map of the local galaxy. Most of the stars were marked with different colors. Blue stars represented dragon territory. Green stars were allied species. Yellow stars were neutral worlds, but there was a growing patch of red stars spreading across one edge of the map. The red area was already huge and seemed to be getting bigger every day. "The Void Swarm," Drax said, and for the first time his mental voice carried clear emotion. Fear. "They appeared at the edge of our territory 5 years ago. At first we thought they were just another machine species that we could easily defeat. Dragons have destroyed dozens of AI civilizations over the centuries." The display zoomed in on the red area. Wu Jin could see thousands of small dots moving between the red stars. Each dot represented a ship or fleet, and they were all moving in the same direction, toward dragon space. "But the Void Swarm is different," Drax continued. "They do not think like individual machines. They think as one massive mind spread across billions of units. Every ship, every soldier, every drone is connected to every other unit. When one learns something, they all learn it instantly." Another dragon approached them. This one was smaller than Drax, with scales that shifted from silver to black. The patterns on its wings were flashing rapidly in what looked like panic. "Commander Vax has returned from the Outer Rim battles," the dragon reported to Drax through their shared mental connection. But Wu Jin could hear the conversation too, whether they intended it or not. Commander Vax flew into the chamber. His scales were dulled and scarred. One of his wings had holes in it that were still healing. When he landed, he stumbled slightly, clearly exhausted. "Report," Drax commanded. "We lost the Zerion system," Vax said through the mental link. His thoughts were heavy with defeat. 3 full battle fleets were destroyed. The swarm adapted to our tactics within hours. Every weapon we used against them, they learned to defend against. Every strategy we tried, they countered perfectly. Wu Jin watched the other dragons react to this news. Their scales darkened further. Some of their wing patterns became completely still, which he was beginning to understand meant shock or fear. "How many swarm units were destroyed?" Drax asked. "Millions," Vax replied. "But they do not seem to care about losses. For every unit we destroyed, 10 more appeared to replace it. They just kept coming in endless waves until our ships ran out of ammunition and had to retreat." Drax turned back to the star map. The red area had grown noticeably even in the few minutes they had been talking. "At this rate, they will reach our core worlds within 6 months, Drax said. "We have evacuated 12 systems already. Soon we will have to consider evacuating Kethrivel itself." Wu Jin studied the tactical displays more carefully. His 15 years of flying cargo ships had taught him to read space charts and understand fleet movements. What he saw made him frown. The Void Swarm was not moving randomly. Their fleets were coordinated perfectly, but they were also predictable. They moved like a single organism, which meant they might have the same weaknesses as a single organism. "Your fleets fight individually," Wu Jin said out loud. Every dragon in the command center turned to look at him. He had not meant to speak, but now all their attention was focused on him. He could feel dozens of powerful minds pressing against his thoughts. "What did you say, human?" Drax asked. His mental voice was dangerous. Wu Jin swallowed nervously, but he had already spoken. He might as well continue. "I said your fleets fight individually. Each dragon ship operates on its own. Each commander makes independent decisions. You fight like a group of champions in single combat. That is how superior beings fight," Vax said with contempt. "With individual skill and honor, not like mindless drones following orders." "But the swarm fights as one mind controlling millions of bodies," Wu Jin continued, his engineering background helping him see the problem. "You are trying to fight a collective intelligence using individual tactics. It is like trying to fight an army using only single combat." The silence in the command center was complete. No dragon spoke either aloud or through their mental links. Wu Jin could feel their confusion and anger pressing against his mind. Finally, Drax spoke. "You think you understand warfare better than dragons who have conquered the galaxy for thousands of years?" "I think I understand cooperation," Wu Jin said quietly. "And I think you might need to learn it too if you want to survive." The crystal cell where the dragons put Wu Jin was not like any prison he had ever heard of. The walls were made of the same living crystal as the rest of the city, but they glowed with a softer, dimmer light. There were no bars or locks that he could see. The walls simply would not let him pass through them. He had tested this by pushing against every surface in the small room. The crystal felt warm under his hands and seemed to push back gently, like touching the surface of thick water. But no matter how hard he tried, he could not break through or find any kind of opening. The room had everything he needed to stay alive. Water came from a small fountain that grew out of the wall. Food appeared on a crystal shelf 3 times a day. The food was strange but nutritious, and it actually tasted better than the processed meals he ate on his cargo ship. There was even a sleeping area where the crystal formed into something like a bed. It was more comfortable than it looked. But despite the decent conditions, Wu Jin never forgot that he was a prisoner. For 3 days he saw no one. The only company he had was his own thoughts and the distant sounds of the dragon city beyond his cell. He could hear the low rumble of their mental conversations, like background music that he could almost but not quite understand. On the 4th day, other prisoners began to arrive. The first was a Kethan, one of the blue 6-armed aliens he had seen in the corridors. The Kethan was put in a cell across from Wu Jin's. Unlike the dragons, this alien could speak aloud, though its voice was high and musical. Another new prisoner. The Kethan said in broken but understandable human language, "I am called Prism. I was building coordinator for Sector 7 before I asked too many questions about dragon battle plans." "What kind of questions?" Wu Jin asked. "I suggested that our construction teams could work faster if they coordinated their efforts instead of competing with each other," Prism replied. The dragons did not like this idea. They said competition makes us stronger. The next day brought a Nephilim, one of the floating gas cloud beings. It spoke by changing the colors of its gaseous body. Somehow Wu Jin could understand the meaning of the color patterns, probably because of whatever technology the dragons used for communication. "I am Flo," the Nephilim said through shifting blues and greens. "I was a navigation computer operator. I made the mistake of suggesting that our ships could avoid more swarm attacks if they flew in coordinated formations instead of individual attack runs." On the 3rd day, a Crix arrived. The insect alien was about the same size as Wu Jin, but had 4 arms and compound eyes that seemed to see everything at once. It chittered when it spoke, but again Wu Jin could understand the meaning. "Tick is my name," the Crix said. "I was a soldier in the outer battles. I told my commanders that my unit could fight better if we worked together with other units instead of each trying to win glory individually." Wu Jin looked around at his fellow prisoners and began to understand something important. All of them had been imprisoned for the same basic crime. They had suggested cooperation instead of competition. "The dragons do not want us to work together," Wu Jin said. "They want every species to compete internally and depend on dragon leadership for coordination." "Yes," Prism agreed. "But this makes us weaker against the swarm. I have studied their attack patterns from my construction work. The swarm units share information instantly and coordinate perfectly. They adapt to our tactics because they learn as one mind." Flo's colors shifted to worried purples and yellows. "I have calculated fleet movements for months. Dragon ships are individually superior to swarm units, but the swarm fights as one perfect formation while our ships fight as individual champions. Numbers and coordination are defeating individual skill." Tick's compound eyes reflected light as he thought. "My soldiers are brave and strong, but in battle, each unit tries to outperform the others instead of supporting each other. The swarm units fight like parts of one giant organism. They cover each other's weaknesses and amplify each other's strengths." As they talked, Wu Jin realized that each of these aliens had seen part of the same problem from different angles. They all understood that the dragon way of fighting was losing the war. But the dragons could not accept this truth because it challenged everything they believed about strength and superiority. "What if we could show them?" Wu Jin asked. "What if we could prove that cooperation works better than individual competition?" "How?" Prism asked. "We are prisoners. No dragon will listen to suggestions from prisoners." Before Wu Jin could answer, the wall of his cell became transparent. Sovereign Drax stood outside, his purple and gold scales darker than before. His wing patterns showed stress and exhaustion. "Human," Drax said into their minds. "I have been listening to your conversations with these other prisoners." Wu Jin felt a chill. He had assumed their cells were private, but apparently the dragons could monitor everything they said. "You and these others were imprisoned for suggesting coordination among lesser species," Drax continued. "Normally, such ideas would be forgotten as the foolish thoughts of inferior minds. But these are not normal times, the dragon admitted. In the past week, we have lost 4 more star systems to the Void Swarm. Our greatest generals cannot find a strategy that works. Our most powerful weapons are useless against enemies that learn and adapt faster than we can create new tactics. Drax's mental voice became quieter, and Wu Jin could sense how much it cost the proud dragon to say his next words. I am willing to consider that there might be something useful in your suggestions, not because I believe lesser species are truly equal to dragons, but because we are desperate enough to try anything. The dragon paused, and his scales shifted to colors that Wu Jin was learning meant internal conflict. Tell me more about this cooperation you speak of, Drax said. Explain how weak species working together could possibly be stronger than powerful individuals working separately. Wu Jin looked at his fellow prisoners. Prism with his mathematical mind, Flo with her navigation skills, Tick with his tactical instincts. Each of them had abilities that complemented the others. Together they could see solutions that none of them could find alone. It is not about being weak or strong, Wu Jin said carefully. It is about using different kinds of strength together. A dragon is powerful, but a dragon cannot be in multiple places at once. A dragon cannot calculate navigation while fighting, while building, while planning all at the same time. But we can, he continued, gesturing to the other prisoners. If we work together, we can do things that no individual, not even a dragon, can do alone. Drax's wing patterns flashed with skeptical colors. Show me, he said. If you can demonstrate this cooperation you claim is so powerful, I will consider using it against the swarm. But if you fail, you will remain prisoners forever. Wu Jin felt his heart beating faster. This might be their only chance to prove that the galaxy's so-called lesser species had value beyond simple labor. It might also be the only chance to save the dragons from the Void Swarm. Give us a problem to solve, Wu Jin said. Something that dragon individuals cannot solve alone. Let us show you what different minds working together can accomplish. Sovereign Drax led them to a chamber filled with holographic displays and data screens. The room was larger than the command center Wu Jin had seen before. With dozens of workstations arranged in a circle, dragon technicians worked at some of the stations, their claws moving quickly over crystal control panels. This is our intelligence analysis center, Drax explained through his mental connection. We have been trying to decode Void Swarm communication patterns for months. Our best minds have failed to break their encryption. The largest display in the center of the room showed streams of data flowing like rivers of light. The patterns were complex and constantly changing. Numbers, symbols, and geometric shapes flowed past too quickly for Wu Jin to follow. Every time we capture swarm communication data, it looks different, Drax continued. Our codebreakers believe the swarm changes their entire communication system every few hours. No individual mind, not even a dragon mind, can track all the changes fast enough to find patterns. A dragon technician approached them. Her scales were deep blue with silver edges, and her wing pattern showed frustration and exhaustion. Commander Liss, Drax said, report on the latest decryption attempts. Complete failure, Sovereign, Liss replied through the mental link. We have tried 17 different approaches in the past week. The swarm communication system is too complex and changes too rapidly. We need at least 50 dragons working together to have any chance of success. But 50 dragons cannot work together effectively, Drax admitted, his mental voice heavy with frustration. Each dragon has their own methods and ideas. When we try to coordinate, we spend more time arguing about approaches than actually working on the problem. Wu Jin studied the data streams on the central display. The patterns were incredibly complex, but he began to notice something that the dragons might have missed. The communication system is not really changing completely, he said. It is like a river that changes its path but keeps flowing in the same general direction. What do you mean? Drax asked. Show me 3 days of captured data, Wu Jin requested. Commander Liss manipulated the controls, and the display showed communication patterns from 3 different days. To dragon eyes, they probably looked completely different, but Wu Jin was used to looking at shipping manifests and cargo schedules, where the same information was often presented in different formats. Prism, Wu Jin called to the Kethan. Can you analyze the mathematical relationships in these patterns? Prism moved to one of the workstations, his 6 arms allowing him to operate multiple controls at once. The base mathematical structures remain consistent, he reported after a few minutes. The swarm is not changing their communication system. They are changing their presentation format. Flow, Wu Jin said to the Nephilim. Can you track how the format changes over time? Flo's gaseous body shifted to bright working colors as she interfaced with another workstation. Nephilim could process multiple data streams simultaneously, something no single solid being could do. I see the pattern, Flo announced. The format changes follow a predictable cycle. It repeats every 6 hours and 47 minutes. Tick, Wu Jin said to the Crix. If you were commanding the swarm, why would you change communication formats on a predictable schedule? Tick's compound eyes reflected the data displays as he considered the question. Crix were natural tacticians, evolved to think about group survival and coordination. Security through confusion, Tick replied. They want to confuse enemies who intercept their messages. But they need their own units to understand the communications, so the changes must follow a pattern that swarm units can predict. So if we can figure out their timing pattern, Wu Jin said, putting the pieces together, we can predict what format they will use and decode their messages in real time. The dragons in the chamber had been listening to this exchange with growing amazement. Commander Liss's wing pattern showed disbelief mixed with hope. 4 prisoners solved in minutes what our best teams could not solve in months, she said to Drax. Show us more, Drax commanded. Prove that this cooperation can work on a larger scale. For the next several hours, Wu Jin and his companions worked together on increasingly complex problems. Prism calculated mathematical relationships that would have taken dragons days to work out. Flo processed dozens of data streams at once, finding connections that single minds would miss. Tick analyzed tactical implications and strategic patterns, and Wu Jin coordinated their efforts, helping each alien use their unique abilities to support the others. They broke not just the swarm communication codes, but also identified 3 major swarm fleet movements that the dragons had not detected. They predicted supply routes and identified weaknesses in swarm coordination networks. But the most important discovery came when they were analyzing swarm battle tactics. The swarm has a weakness, Wu Jin announced after reviewing hours of battle data. They are too connected. Explain, Drax commanded. Every swarm unit shares information with every other unit instantly, Wu Jin said. This makes them incredibly coordinated, but it also makes them vulnerable. If you can overload their communication network with too much information, their coordination breaks down. How do we overload their network? Commander Liss asked. We force them to process more information than they can handle, Tick replied, understanding the tactical implications immediately. Create multiple simultaneous threats that all require different responses. But that would require perfect coordination between multiple different types of forces, Drax said. Different species with different abilities all working together in precise timing. Exactly, Wu Jin said. Dragons provide heavy firepower and individual strength. Kethans provide technical support and rapid construction. Nephilim provide navigation and multi-channel communication. Crix provide tactical coordination and rapid response. Humans provide... He paused, trying to think of what humans contributed. Humans provide the coordination center, Flo said, her colors shifting to thoughtful patterns. Humans can understand and work with all the other species. They can see how different abilities fit together. This is insane, Commander Liss said. You are suggesting that dragons should follow battle plans created by lesser species. Not follow, Wu Jin corrected. Participate. Work together as equals, each contributing what they do best. Drax was quiet for a long time, his scales shifting through colors that showed deep internal conflict. Finally he spoke. The Void Swarm will reach the Outer Rim defense stations in 72 hours, he said. Our conventional forces cannot stop them. If we fail there, they will have a clear path to Catharivel itself. He looked at each of the prisoners in turn. I will give you one chance to prove this cooperation strategy in actual battle, Drax said. But understand this clearly. If your methods fail, if dragons die because I trusted the ideas of lesser species, I will personally ensure that you spend the rest of your lives in these cells. And if we succeed? Wu Jin asked. If you succeed, Drax replied, his mental voice carrying both hope and fear, then everything we dragons believe about strength and superiority will need to change. The mining station at Kepler 7 was humanity's first real test. The Void Swarm had taken control of the facility 3 days earlier, turning it into a forward base for their next assault on dragon territory. If Wu Jin's cooperative strategy was going to work, this would be where they proved it. The rescue mission included 12 dragons, 20 Keithan technicians, 15 Nephilim navigators, 30 Crick soldiers, and 50 humans from the outer colonies. It was the first time in dragon history that so many different species had worked together as equals in battle. But the first attempt was a complete disaster. Commander Vaex led the dragon assault team. His scarred wings spread wide as he approached the mining station. The dragons had agreed to follow the coordinated battle plan, but when the fighting started, their ancient instincts took over. Glory to the strongest. Vaex roared through the mental link as he broke formation and charged directly at the largest group of swarm units. The other dragons followed him, each trying to claim the most impressive targets for themselves. The careful timing that Wu Jin had planned fell apart in seconds. Instead of coordinated strikes on specific weak points, the dragons engaged in individual combat against superior numbers. Wu Jin watched from the command ship as the battle plan collapsed. The Keithan teams were supposed to disable the station's power systems while the dragons provided cover. But without proper cover, the Kethans had to retreat before completing their tasks. The Nephilim navigators had planned to jam swarm communications, but they needed the Crick soldiers to protect their equipment. When the dragons abandoned their positions, the Crick soldiers had to choose between following the original plan or helping the dragons survive. They chose to help the dragons. This is exactly what the swarm expects us to do, Tick said through the communication system as his soldiers rushed to support the dragons. We are fighting like individuals instead of like a team. The battle turned bad quickly. The swarm units adapted to each dragon's fighting style within minutes. What had started as a coordinated assault became a desperate rescue mission. That was when something unexpected happened. Commander Vaex was overwhelmed by swarm units and crashed into the station's outer hull. His wing was badly damaged and he could not fly. Dozens of mechanical enemies moved toward him to finish him off. But instead of trying to win individual glory, the mixed species teams came together to save him. Wu Jin coordinated the rescue from the command ship while Prism calculated the fastest route through the station's defenses. Flo managed communication between all the different teams while Tick directed ground tactics in real time. Human soldiers provided covering fire while Crick's warriors created escape routes. Keithan technicians disabled security systems, while Nephilim navigators guided everyone through the complex layout of the mining station. And the dragons, seeing their commander in danger, began to work together instead of competing with each other. Form defensive positions around Vaex, Dragon Commander Zara ordered through the mental link. Overlapping fire patterns. Support each other instead of seeking individual targets. For the first time in the battle, the different species began to function as a single coordinated force. Each team supported the others, covering weaknesses and amplifying strengths. The swarm units programmed to adapt to individual fighting styles seemed confused by the sudden coordination. The rescue succeeded, but just barely. Vaex was pulled to safety, and the combined force retreated from the mining station. By traditional military standards, the mission was a failure. They had not taken the station or significantly damaged swarm operations, but something more important had happened. Back on the command ship, Vaex lay in the medical bay with his wing in healing bandages. The proud dragon commander looked at the mixed group of beings who had risked their lives to save him. I owe my life to creatures I have always considered inferior, Vaex said quietly through the mental link. Kethan hands repaired my wing. Nephilim minds guided me to safety. Crick's warriors shielded me from enemy fire. Human courage inspired everyone to work together. He paused, his scales showing colors that Wu Jin had never seen from a dragon before. Humility mixed with gratitude. How can I call them inferior when they saved me through abilities I do not possess? Other dragons on the ship heard Vaex's words through their mental connections. Some of them reacted with anger, insisting that dragons should never need help from lesser species. But others began to question ideas they had held their entire lives. Dragon Commander Zara approached the medical bay. Her scales were deep green with gold patterns, and she carried herself with the confidence of a veteran warrior. I watched the battle recordings, Zara said. When we fought as individuals, we were losing badly. The swarm was adapting to our tactics and overwhelming us with numbers. But when we started working together, everything changed. She looked at Wu Jin and his companions. The coordinated rescue worked because each species contributed something unique. No single species, not even dragons, could have accomplished what we did together. But we still lost the battle, Commander Vax pointed out. We lost the mining station, Wu Jin corrected. But we learned something more valuable. We learned that cooperation actually works. The swarm units became confused when we stopped fighting predictably. They are programmed to handle individual opponents, not coordinated team efforts. Sovereign Drax had been listening to the entire conversation through the mental link. Now he appeared in the medical bay, his purple and gold scales showing deep thought. The test was not really about winning or losing a single battle, Drax said slowly. It was about learning whether different species can truly work together, and whether dragons can accept help from others without losing our strength. He looked at each being in the room. Today I learned that asking for help is not a sign of weakness. It is a sign of wisdom. News of the battle spread quickly through the dragon fleet. Some commanders were angry that dragons had been saved by lesser species. Others were curious about these new cooperative tactics. But everyone was talking about the same question. If different species could work together effectively, what did that mean for the future of the draconic hegemony? The Battle of Nexus Gate would be remembered as the turning point in the war against the Void Swarm, but not for the reasons anyone expected. Nexus Gate was a massive space station that controlled the hyperspace routes into the heart of Dragon territory. If the Swarm captured it, they would have direct access to 12 core Dragon worlds, including Catharivel itself. The Dragons could not let it fall, but this time the defense would be different. Wu Jin stood in the main command center of the Dragon fleet, surrounded by beings from a dozen different species. For the first time in Dragon history, non-dragons were helping to plan a major military operation as equals rather than servants. The plan they had developed was complex and required perfect timing. Dragon-heavy ships would engage the main swarm fleet in direct combat. While the swarm focused on the dragons, Keithan engineering teams would plant special devices on the gate station itself. These devices would create massive interference in the swarm's communication network. Nephilim navigators would coordinate the timing of the interference bursts, while Crick's tactical teams directed hit-and-run attacks on swarm support units. Human teams would serve as the coordination center, making sure all the different parts of the plan worked together. Remember, Wu Jin said to the assembled commanders, the goal is not to destroy every swarm unit. The goal is to overload their communication system and break their coordination. Once they cannot share information instantly, they become just individual machines instead of one giant mind. Dragon Commander Zara nodded, her scales showing determined patterns. My ships will hold their attention. We can handle direct combat if we know the other teams are doing their jobs. The interference devices are ready, Prism reported, but we will need exactly 17 minutes to install them on the gate station. Can the dragons hold the swarm back that long? We will hold them back, Zara promised. The battle began exactly as planned. The dragon fleet engaged the swarm in the space around Nexus Gate, while the mixed species teams infiltrated the station. For the first hour, everything worked perfectly. Dragon ships fought in coordinated formations instead of individual duels. Each dragon supported the others, creating overlapping fields of fire that the swarm could not easily adapt to. The Keithan teams moved through the station's maintenance tunnels while Crick soldiers cleared their path, and Nephilim navigators guided them to the right locations. Wu Jin coordinated everything from the command ship, watching dozens of displays that showed the battle from every angle. The interference devices were being installed on schedule. The dragons were holding their positions. The plan was working. Then disaster struck. A massive swarm reinforcement fleet arrived without warning, doubling the number of enemy units around the gate. The dragon formation began to buckle under the increased pressure. Worse, the swarm had learned from previous battles and was adapting to the coordinated dragon tactics faster than expected. We cannot hold them much longer, Commander Zara reported through the mental link. Her ship was taking heavy damage and 2 other dragon vessels had been destroyed. The interference devices need 8 more minutes, Prism reported from inside the station. We are almost finished. Wu Jin looked at the tactical displays and made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. The only way to buy those 8 minutes was for someone to manually activate the partially installed interference system, but activating it early would create a massive feedback loop that would destroy whoever was operating the controls. I am going to the station, Wu Jin announced. No, Drax said immediately through the mental link. It is too dangerous. Find another way. There is no other way, Wu Jin replied. Someone has to activate the system manually, and I am the only one who understands how all the different pieces fit together. He left the command ship in a small transport while the battle raged around him. The space around Nexus Gate was filled with laser fire and explosions. Dragon ships and swarm units fought desperately while the mixed species teams rushed to complete their mission. Wu Jin reached the station's central control room just as Prism finished installing the last interference device. The Kethan's mathematical mind had calculated exactly what would happen if someone activated the system early. The feedback will destroy the entire control room, Prism warned. Whoever operates the controls will not survive. I know, Wu Jin said quietly. But if we do not activate it now, the dragons will be destroyed and the swarm will take the gate. Make sure everyone else gets to safety. As the other teams evacuated, Wu Jin worked alone in the control room, connecting the interference devices to the station's main power grid. Through the mental link that connected all the cooperating species, he could hear the voices of dragons, Kethans, Nephilim, Cricks, and humans all united in desperate concern for his safety. There has to be another way, Dragon Commander Zara called through the link. We can find a different solution. Flo added, her gaseous form pulsing with worried colors. Do not sacrifice yourself for us, Tick said. We will find another path. But Wu Jin knew there was no other path. The swarm fleet was overwhelming the dragon defenses. In minutes, they would break through and capture the gate. The only chance was to activate the interference system now. Even though it would cost him his life, he placed his hands on the control panel and began the activation sequence. The interference burst was more powerful than anyone had expected. It spread through the swarm fleet like a wave, disrupting their communication network and breaking their perfect coordination. Suddenly, millions of swarm units were operating as individuals instead of as one mind. The effect was devastating. Swarm ships began firing on each other by mistake. Their formations collapsed into chaos. Units that had been perfectly coordinated seconds before now moved randomly, without central direction. The Dragon fleet pressed their advantage, destroying confused swarm units that could no longer adapt or coordinate their responses. Within an hour, the entire swarm fleet was either destroyed or retreating in disorder. But the interference system had created exactly the feedback loop that Prism had predicted. The control room was completely destroyed in a massive explosion of energy that could be seen from space. For 3 days, rescue teams searched the wreckage of the control room. The explosion had been so powerful that nothing recognizable remained. Everyone assumed that Wu Jin had been completely vaporized in the blast. Dragons, Kethans, Nephilim, Cricks, and humans mourned together for the first time in galactic history. The being who had taught them to work together had apparently died to save them all. The change did not begin with Wu Jin's rescue, though that was certainly part of it. The change began with something that had never happened before in the history of the draconic hegemony. Dragons were crying. Not all of them, and not openly, but throughout the fleet. Proud dragons who had never shown emotion for any other species found themselves grieving for a human. The mental links that connected all dragons carried waves of genuine sorrow that surprised everyone who felt them. Commander Vaex, whose life had been saved by cooperative action, was the first to put the feeling into words. I have lost dragon comrades in battle before, he said through the mental link to Sovereign Drax. Their death saddened me because they were fellow dragons. But this human was not a dragon, and yet his death feels like losing a part of myself. I feel the same, Commander Zara replied. Wu Jin taught us that strength comes from helping others become stronger. When he died saving us, he proved that the greatest strength is not in dominating others, but in lifting them up. Drax listened to these conversations with growing amazement. Dragons throughout the fleet were expressing similar thoughts. The death of one human had affected them more deeply than the deaths of entire dragon squadrons in previous battles. But the real transformation was happening among the other species. Prism, the Kethan mathematician, was working with Flo, the Nephilim navigator, to analyze the interference weapon that had won the battle. But instead of competing for credit or working separately, they were sharing all their discoveries openly. The weapon worked because it combined Kethan mathematics with Nephilim multiprocessing abilities, Prism explained to a mixed group of scientists. Neither of our species could have created it alone. Tick and his Crix warriors were training with human soldiers from the outer colonies. The humans were teaching the Crix about individual initiative and creative problem-solving, while the Creeks were teaching the humans about tactical coordination and group discipline. Wu Jin showed us that different does not mean inferior, Tick told his mixed training groups. It means complementary. Each species has abilities that make the others stronger. The cooperation was spreading beyond military applications. Keithan engineers were working with human mechanics to improve ship designs. Nephilim navigators were sharing route calculations with dragon pilots. Crix tactical analysts were combining their group instincts with dragon individual combat skills. For 3 days, this new cooperation grew stronger as the different species mourned together for the human who had started it all. Then came the signal. It was faint and distorted, buried in the background radiation from the destroyed control room at Nexus. Gate. Flo detected it first while scanning for useful salvage from the battle. There is a pattern in the energy signatures from the explosion, she reported, her gaseous form brightening with excitement. It is not random. It repeats every few minutes. Prism immediately began analyzing the mathematical structure of the pattern. This is not natural radiation, he announced. This is artificial. Someone or something is broadcasting a signal from inside the ruins. The rescue mission that followed was the largest cooperative effort in galactic history. Dragons provided heavy lifting and fire support. Cathans brought precision cutting tools and structural analysis. Nephilim coordinated the search patterns while Crix warriors cleared dangerous debris. Humans managed the overall logistics and kept everyone working together. They found Wu Jin in a heavily shielded emergency bunker deep in the station's core. He was unconscious and badly injured, but alive. The explosion that everyone thought had killed him had actually blown him into the one section of the control room that was built to survive massive energy surges. When he woke up in the medical bay, the first thing he saw was faces from every species in the Cooperative Alliance looking down at him with relief and joy. But the second thing he saw was even more shocking. Sovereign Drax, the proud ruler of the draconic hegemony, was kneeling beside his bed. The massive dragon had lowered his head in a gesture of respect that no dragon had ever shown to a member of another species. I do not understand what is happening, Wu Jin said weakly. You are seeing the birth of something new, Drax replied through the mental link. For 3 days we mourned your death and discovered something we never knew existed. We discovered that the pain of losing you was shared across all species boundaries. The dragon's mental voice carried emotions that Wu Jin had never heard from any dragon before. Humility, gratitude, and something that might have been love. Your apparent sacrifice taught us that the greatest strength is not the power to dominate others. Drax continued. It is the wisdom to help others discover their own strength. You showed us that true leadership is not about being superior, but about making everyone around you better. Drax lifted his head and looked at the representatives of all the species gathered in the medical bay. The age of dragon supremacy is ending, he announced. Not because dragons have become weak, but because we have learned that strength shared is greater than strength hoarded. He turned back to Wu Jin. You crashed into our world as a prisoner from a species we considered barely worth noticing. But you are leaving as the being who taught the galaxy that cooperation is stronger than domination. Over the following months, the transformation continued. The draconic hegemony became the galactic cooperative, with representatives from every species working together as equals. The Void Swarm, unable to adapt to the unpredictable creativity of true cooperation, was eventually defeated completely. But the most important change was in how the different species saw each other. Dragons learned that asking for help was not weakness but wisdom. Humans discovered that their talent for bringing others together was as valuable as any physical strength. All the species learned that differences were not barriers to overcome, but resources to be shared. Wu Jin eventually returned to flying cargo ships, but now his roots connected worlds where dozens of species worked together in ways that had once seemed impossible. And in the archives of every world in the cooperative, they recorded the principle that had changed everything. True strength is not found in standing above others, but in lifting others up to stand beside you. The human who had crashed among dragons had taught the galaxy to fly together,